I'm Tokibusa, and we are here in Singapore for Token 2049, and I'm joined by John Lilic. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. Nice to be hanging out.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you've had quite the interesting Web3 experience, probably a little bit different from everyone else's. Do you kind of want to dive into how you got started?
Yeah, sure. It's been probably like 12 years now, I guess, since I started kind of getting into all this stuff. Um, I was very fortunate to get into Bitcoin through a bit of a traumatic situation. I sort of got canceled before canceling was even a thing. I was doing lots and lots of e-commerce. I would buy domain names. I would optimize websites, like SEO optimize.
Hmm.
And then this is sort of like before Amazon was really like eating the world. Um, Wholesale and drop shipping, wholesalers drop shipping was a very vibrant ecosystem, and you would use platforms like Magento to plug in and sort of.
Hmm.
Um, so I would process credit card payments, and then they would fulfill orders, and I would take like a small margin. And I was doing this across a multitude of different products, for example, garden seeds, gardening products. And then one day, the bank kind of like froze all my money and closed my merchant services account. They accused me of selling dildos and sex toys, which I wasn't, but even if I was, like, there's nothing illegal about that.
True.
I got a letter from them. This is one of the big major UK banks. I had an office in London at the time. They said they acknowledged I wasn't doing anything illegal, but I was hurting their reputation. I said, wait a minute, you guys fixed the Libor rate, if you recall that, and you laundered, tens of billions of dollars of Mexican cartel money. What do you mean I'm hurting your reputation? Like I'm a nobody. But anyway, in the midst of that, so they froze all my money. It's like I had to have my father Western Union me money just so I could buy groceries. Like it was terrible.
Oh, wow.
And then my business stopped because I couldn't process credit cards anymore. Um, I started in a panic looking for alternatives. Very quickly realized that things like PayPal were not going to work for me,
Hmm.
or were going to be very very hard. And so, in the midst of all that, I discovered Bitcoin, and that was kind of like the end of 2012. Within a year, I was totally obsessed. I moved to New York City. At the time, most of the technical meetups around, like anywhere in the world were happening in New York. They were called BitDev meetups.
Absolutely.
I started working at the Bitcoin Center. I volunteered there. A guy named Nick Spanos, very old friend of mine. And then basically we were doing events and meetups right next to New York Stock Exchange, 40 Broad Street. Lots of early crypto pioneers came through that place, either to do events or just hang out or whatever. And then I met a guy named Joe Lubin. I got into Ethereum sort of from the beginning. I ended up being one of the first ConsenSys employees. I spent 6 years there. And then at the end of 2020, I left after like intensely working to try and build the Ethereum ecosystem. I was one of the first sort of investors and advisors to Polygon when it rebranded from Matic. Spent a couple years there. I've been running my fund ever since and working with Telos, this kind of like seemingly obscure project that's kind of getting a lot more attention these days. So that's a little bit of the history of it all, I guess.
So Telos seems like quite an interesting project. It sounds like you also had some early findings about it when you were looking at a contract. Do you want to kind of delve into what happened and how you got so interested?
Yeah, so there was a 2020 exploit called, the exact technical name was the Geth Return Data Corruption via Data Copy Exploit. Okay?
Okay.
And so Telos launched in 2018. At the base layer, it has a delegated proof of stake virtual machine, very, very performant. And then within that, in 2021, they built an EVM. So it's an emulation. It's emulated within the Antelope VM, and the emulation is done in Rust and Wasm. Okay, so it's quite elegant, which gives you these like high performance characteristics. Okay, so in 2021, this is when I found out about Telos. Sentinel, which was a very, very reputable auditing firm at the time, fuzz tested the Telos EVM because Telos had claims that the EVM could do 15,200 transactions a second, which kind of bold claims, right?
At that time, yes.
And still to this day, that would represent the most performant EVM in the market. And as it turns out, those tests were all validated, and in fact, that is the performance threshold of the EVM. But in the course of fuzz testing it, Sentinel discovered this exploit. The thing is, that exploit could have brought down Ethereum. I mean, it was like a major, major vulnerability. So very quietly in the background, they notified all the different clients, all the different teams, and basically they pushed through an emergency fix. And then the news came out shortly after that, something had happened, but it was resolved. So what the heck is this? As it turns out, it would have been a total catastrophe. But Telos entered into Ethereum lore at that time, and that's how I got involved. And then I started to look into it, and I realized this is quite an interesting set of characteristics. As it turns out today, the network has done nearly 400 million. It's produced nearly 400 million blocks.
Oh, wow.
Zero downtime, and the whole thing launched in 2018 without an ICO. So it was kind of like a response. It's the anti-EOS. It launched as a fork of EOS.
Okay.
Because those guys raised $4.5 billion and invested very, very small percentage of that into the EOS ecosystem. So Telos forked, and it airdropped the entire supply, and it launched without any money, without anything. Like, it just sort of, kind of like, it's been grinding away step by step, and over the years, it's sort of gotten to this place where 6 years have passed. It has a community, it has an ecosystem, and it seems to be in some ways much more vibrant than the original EOS, despite not having the benefit of many billions, or really any money at all. And I think that kind of appealed to me, and so that's kind of how this project came onto my radar.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that actually the base layer and the ecosystem that currently exists, the community, etc., is very well suited for ZK innovation, and in particular because it's very difficult to have super strong assumptions about what exactly is going to win in the end, because that ecosystem changes so fast. So the extent to which you can continuously research, find the latest state of the art, put it all together, and then in one moment you have a highly performant system, seemed to me like a better way to do it. And rather than many of these ZK projects, which have raised like hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're sort of locked into certain assumptions they made a few years ago, like a certain type of prover, for example. And so that's what we've been focused on this year. And sort of combined, when you take everything I just said and kind of put it together, it's a very weird set of confluence of circumstances that are hard to reproduce. And I kind of say that Telos is, before Netflix we had VHS. It's like a Hollywood B movie that went straight to VHS, but then like after some number of years it becomes a cult classic, and it has like a revival and like this revival arc, and suddenly it becomes cool. So that's sort of the best way to describe what this Telos thing is, I would say.
It sounds actually very impressive, especially they've come a long way being, as you said, maybe an anti-EOS in that essence, not really having the funding, but still being able to work on their vision and continuing to grow despite it all.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to do it, and like I said, it'd be very hard to reproduce. And then, there's some other, let's say, strategic considerations as well. The regulatory landscape obviously has changed, particularly in the United States, escalated sort of heightened activity across the board. There are federal statute of limitations, generally 5 years. And so in the case of Telos, that period of time has lapsed. Not to say that it can't be sued, but it's sort of like less likely to be, or less, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's less likely of a candidate compared to other projects for a number of reasons, including the fact that it never did an ICO, it never did a token sale. And so in addition to the fact that it's been 6+ years, et cetera, et cetera. So somehow it starts to sort of look quite strategic in many ways, like, wow, maybe we can actually take this self kind of bootstrapped organic community, move it in a high-tech direction. We've been able to hire and bring on like 12 PhDs, some really great engineers. We've become like very technical as a team, largely because people, like when they find out the nuance and the full scope of like this story that I'm telling,
Yeah.
it's sort of like appealing, and people are like, oh wow, yeah, I wouldn't mind working on this project. And it's been tremendously helpful in terms of recruiting really top talent as well. Yeah, and all of that is just difficult to like if you wanted to reproduce it today, it would be hard because you're in a landscape where many, for example, in the case of Ethereum, L2s are running large subsidy programs.
Absolutely.
And those subsidy programs either attract users or developers, and you can't blame people for participating in ecosystems because they receive tremendous rewards. But what we're trying to do is very different. We're trying to just be, almost very boring. Like we're just trying to build an organic ecosystem with good products, and if people want to participate, they can.
So from your perspective, how much do you think your role at ConsenSys and then moving into Polygon has actually helped shape your advisorship with Telos?
Well, I mean, maybe like anything else, experience is important.
Of course.
In this ecosystem, there's probably not a lot of people that have a decade of experience, and both ConsenSys and Polygon, those are two projects that became unicorns. I mean, they achieved multi-billion-dollar valuations. In the case of ConsenSys, we had several thousand employees. I started off as like the 5th employee, so I went through that
whole growth phase.
Yeah, kind of like the Silicon Valley show, and it's like you get a sense for what to do and what not to do, how Bitcoin market, psychology impacts decision making. There are times when there's type of mania and euphoria, when we get those violent explosions and the price pumps like tremendously in a very short period of time. And then in those moments, it's important not to get unhinged and make poor decisions, like suddenly start recklessly hiring huge quantities of people, losing a sense of like importance for staying frugal and staying lean. Likewise, when things are tough, which pretty much is most of the time, right? Most of the time things are going down and it's unclear. It's also very important to have conviction in your vision and keep working and keep shipping even when it seems like no one cares about what you're doing. And then, just very practical matters like how do you, build a community? How do you build a brand? And definitely in the case of Polygon, I think a lot of people don't realize that actually before Polygon, it was called Matic, right?
Yes, indeed.
And Matic has been around since like 2017.
Yep.
So it had 4 good years of just like very little to no activity. I mean, Matic was like a fraction of a penny for years.
Absolutely, yes.
And it was like a really long grind until either the timing, the technology, or a confluence of a number of things was right, and then it had the opportunity to scale. Likewise, at ConsenSys, people think about MetaMask, and MetaMask today has 30, 40, 50 million users. I don't know, it's one of the biggest products in our space. But it started in 2016 as a hackathon. As a hackathon project, and I was there. And then for years, we had no idea how to convert that into a sustainable business. It just burned a lot of money.
Okay.
And so, what you have to understand is these success stories have a very long-tailed. I mean, it takes time, and so. I think that's also part of it is just as we set direction and strategic goals, not taking shortcuts and understanding that it takes time to build sustainable ecosystems.
Yes, absolutely. Without proper planning, you're always going to plan to fail, essentially. Yeah. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. Now, I have heard that Telos has also had a recent announcement about a slight change in their ecosystem by adding an exchange. Can you kind of delve into what the exchange is and how things are going to be operating from here?
Yeah, so overall, I would say that we are trying to evolve into a Web3 venture production studio.
Okay.
With a multitude of products in service of our community.
Hmm.
And so that's a little bit unique because typically, starting off as an L1, you sort of stay focused and stay in your lane as an L1, and maybe
Yeah.
you work with other exchanges and you get listed and everything else. Or maybe the inverse is true, where exchanges, once they get to a certain point, then launch a network. We've seen obviously Coinbase launch Base as
Yeah.
an example, and BNB and other examples. But to do it in the inverse, where you start with an L1, you build a community, you expand the product and service offering, and ultimately even build an exchange to sort of unify things. I think it's pretty unique. I'm unaware of other projects that are taking this approach that have done this. So we've entered into the Binance Link program, and the Binance Link program is very unique insofar as provided you meet their requirements, which are very stringent, and it takes a long time,
I can believe that.
then what you get is their backend,
Mhm.
and so that means accounts, sub accounts, all the security infrastructure, which is very, very important, and then of course the order books, the volume, liquidity, etc. So you can then create your own front end, and now you've got an exchange that you can effectively bootstrap, with the two most difficult things being solved for you through the Binance Link program, which is to say security and the initial liquidity. And so that I think has been tremendously helpful and very, very, very valuable. And the idea being that once the exchange launches, it will be in support of the Telos ecosystem. So lots of Telos trading pairs, fluid, sort of seamless UX between Telos networks and products and the exchange.
Mhm.
And of course, the opportunity to expand into different regions and really go global with this thing. And it's like Telos has never had the money, because it never did an ICO or anything like that,
Yeah.
to do the things that other projects do, which is to say, pay lots of money for listing fees and lots of money for market makers and all of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And yet still, it's pretty well listed on a number of exchanges. And we just figured, look, instead of trying to go through all of those hurdles, why not just build our own exchange, and then offer all sorts of premium services for our users and our community. So definitely in the regions where we can, from a compliance standpoint, we're going to offer staking rewards, so you can stake in the exchange and earn your share of rewards based on the revenue the exchange makes.
Okay.
In jurisdictions where we can't do that, we won't offer it,
Makes sense.
of course. But we will also, likewise, again, in jurisdictions where we can, we will be doing a buy and burn based on the revenue that the exchange generates. We'll be buying and burning Telos tokens. So the exchange is going to be a flywheel. It's one of the cogs in the sort of like set of different products that we've built, all designed to add utility to the Telos community and ultimately in support of the Telos token. So, when it's all said and done, what we want is to have our L1, our base layer, our EVM, our ZK VM, our recursive proof protocol, Snark Tor, the exchange. We're going to be launching additional ventures in the future as well, and all of that working in symbiosis to offer basically our own end-to-end ecosystem without needing reliance and dependence on others. So that's kind of the vision. That's the plan.
So it sounds like you're truly creating a one-stop shop for anyone that wants to enter into, honestly, crypto as a whole, but also into the Telos ecosystem. With that in mind, are there certain aspects that you feel may be more difficult to work through with this, or do you feel like it's going to continue to be something you can easily push forward with these ideas?
Well, nothing worth having comes easy, right? So
Yeah.
that's and that's part of our brand, which is to say, like, we don't do gimmicky stuff. We try to build everything ourselves. We'll do it the hard way. But it's very clear when you look at, for example, Coinbase as a model. They've built everything themselves, and they've built their own ecosystem, and that's clearly been working tremendously well. And so moving in that direction as best as we can, even if it takes time, even if it's hard, that's definitely the right way to do it, without sort of having too much dependence on others, and then offering that as a full kind of service end-to-end solution to our community. We feel very, very strongly that's the right way to go.
Okay.
So we'll see. So basically, between the exchange, between our ZK stuff, and a bunch of the other things we've mentioned on the roadmap, Q1 of next year is shaping up to be pretty big for us. Many things are going to launch: Snark Tor, ZKVM, the exchange, etc. So hopefully, if we're having this conversation again, maybe this time next year, perhaps.
Yeah.
All of these things will be sort of online integrated, and the Telos ecosystem should hopefully be very, very robust.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know there's a lot to be had, especially with essentially Q4 and Q1 coming up. Along the way, though, what has been probably your favorite high point throughout this whole entire experience with Telos?
Definitely, like it's kind of one of those things. When you work hard for something, the serotonin, the dopamine in your brain, releases like a reward.
Mm-hmm.
So the team members work. I mean, there's a great work ethic in this project with these people, and so definitely succession of wins. It's already been a wild and crazy year. I mean, from where we started until given where we are today, I think Telos, when you look at it in the market, it's one of the only tokens that have outperformed Bitcoin this year, as an example. It's been a long, hard slog. We've had many tough things we've had to do that require a whole lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the high points are like feeling good at the end of, I don't know, some crazy 2-3 week sprint of an insane amount of work. And then you sort of get it done, and then you kind of feel good. So I think that's a recurring theme, and the work ethic with everybody on board with this project is it's really excellent.
So beyond releasing the news about the exchange that's going on, what else have you guys been planning to do here in Singapore?
Well, I mean, everybody has been like super jet lagged, and we all showed up with not a lot of notice, and we have to head out pretty soon. There's a very, very, very busy schedule this month.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we haven't had time to enjoy Singapore, but maybe next time, especially the food. I mean, this is like a great place for like a foodie trip.
You're not kidding.
So maybe next time we'll have the luxury of an extra week or something. But really the last few days have just been intense, and we're all out of here like tonight or tomorrow, and
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and then we've got like several other events coming up and milestones, and so it's go time. It's like super busy for the rest of the year. Like it's a very busy time for us.
So you guys are essentially just staying bullish all the way through probably the end of 2025, it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if bullish is the right word. It's more, it's kind of like we have no choice but to
keep going.
Yeah, get through like a mountain of work.
Okay.
And then we'll see how things shape up. But yeah, the goal is to get to that other side where we have our self-reliance, mm-hmm. because we have our own end-to-end ecosystem, and that's really what we're working towards. So we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Super good. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, what's up?
This is
But it's not something Genzio is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a
How
hive.
many you know we do not understand that we do not understand?
Ladies and gentlemen.
We're back at the Genzio Media House.
Oswald, thanks so much for joining us today.